Take a seat, cutie. I think it's the perfect time of day to have a little chat, right? To get ready, sparkle up, right? Maybe even go get a little bit of grub. But in order to do that, I think we gotta, make the mundane magnificent. For me, that looks like doing my makeup with a wonderfully scented candle. This is called Fancy Tea. It's by the brand. Oh, I might need to cut that stem, but listen, I'm not getting up to do that. We're just gonna have to burn the house down. So this is a brand called Lax Lux Candles. Um, the scent is Fancy Tea. The notes are white tea, ginger, and lemon. Honestly, honey, it is a great weekend scent. It's a nice, I plan on relaxing type of scent. And naturally, we're gonna have a cup of coffee. I made my fancy coffee today. I don't know if you can see it, but I had the whipped cream popped to the top, right, honey? But I've already started sipping it because you don't want to let it get too cold because I like my coffee hot with a slight filter of cold whip, okay? So the foundation I've been loving is the Tier Mask Fit. So that's what I'll be wearing today. I've gotten to a point where I don't use as much makeup as I used to. Does that make me special? No. You know what makes me special? The fact that I'm undiagnosed and yet I'm running wild and free. Um, but I really like this because I don't have to put on as much. But maybe, to tell you the truth, maybe I never needed to put on as much. Maybe I was just convinced in my youth that I was absolutely monstrous. And truthfully, I believed for a long time that I was absolutely monstrous. In fact, I was reminded of this. I can do both. I can talk and put on makeup. I was reminded of this morning when I was watching YouTube. I love YouTube. I love a good long form video. Speaking of, you should definitely be following my YouTube. This may end up on that YouTube. And the commercial for the movie, I think is You Me in Tuscany. That's what it is. You Me in Tuscany came up, and it was beautiful. Is it Halle Bailey? I don't know, y'all. I don't keep up with everything. I know I just jam to a song and keep it rolling, but I think it's Halle Bailey. And then there was this cute little tenderoni, as they used to call him when I was younger, who was the love interest, right? Two beautiful brown skinned black people. And that felt huge to me because as I watched this commercial, I found that I was getting emotional. And I had to stop and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's perimenopause. And then it was like, maybe it's not perimenopause. Maybe it's just the hormones. And then I thought, maybe, just maybe, I'm healing. Okay? Now, let me explain the correlation, why I think this may be healing. It also could be one of the other three, right? But when I was in a household with my spouse, I was so emotionally and mentally deprived that I thought that there was just something so wrong with me. I used to have to ask my spouse to hug me. And he would come home and I would be excited to see him. And to tell you the truth, I no longer understand why I was excited to see him, other than the fact that I was so mentally broken, and being programmed from a child up to accept scraps as love. And it's interesting because I was talking to my therapist about this, and that was kind of a conclusion that I realized I came to. So I used to be excited to see him when he came home. And I think you should be excited to see your spouse. But the way he treated me, I should not have been excited, honey. And yet, here I was, ready to deliver myself up, a willing sacrifice. And I remember he used to say, well, let me wash my hands and stuff so I could, then I'll hug you. And initially that sounds very sweet until it got to a point where he would always forget to hug me. And I got tired of asking because what I learned in that process was that if I was valued, if my personhood, if my existence, if I was seen as a full emotional being, there wouldn't have been a forgetting, because the forgetting would be a whole day, it would be a whole week. And at a certain point I stopped counting because I just stopped asking, Um, I think I think I want to get rid of these bags under my eyes just a little bit. And so what I'm getting at is I became accustomed to taking the bare minimum when it comes to love. And as I was watching this commercial, part of what made me emotional was seeing was being able to see the depiction of kindness in a loving relationship and thinking for the first time in a long time that could have been me. Whereas when I was in my relationship, I got to a point where I shut down my own desires because I knew that they would never be met. And so I stopped saying that could be me, and I would say that'll never happen, or love isn't real. I had internalized these feelings to allow myself to survive. It had gotten so wild inside of my head because of this like deprivation that I started to believe that normal marriages didn't include love, or that there were that most marriages really are a performance of love. And in a large way, I still believe that. Most people that I know that are married, I feel like there's a lot of external performance. But as I was watching this commercial and there was this budding romance between these two beautiful people, right? I thought, we all want this fantasy. We all want something of this fantasy. But how many of us are willing to give of ourselves deeply enough to have this fantasy? And then I thought, how many of us went into life, went into love, giving wholeheartedly only to have our hearts ripped out? And so you have a world, a society, groups of people who have to walk with guards on themselves, who walk like a badly thrown bowling ball. Like, I just need those guardrails up because I might crash into somebody, right? And I think about how that became me. And part of why I think these feelings are a part of the healing process are because I'm finally able to see that I could have been loved. Even if it was sparked by a fictional romance commercial, I could see myself being loved. And that's growth because I have been so programmed to feel like being loved was a burden that I was taking away from someone else, so much so that being able to see this snippet of a commercial and smile and think, oh my gosh, that's so sweet, was progress. Because another thing is, because I had to turn off my emotions and turn off my belief that love was something that could be given to me, I even struggled with the portrayal of kindness of the portrayal of a loving relationship in a movie or in media or even amongst other people. I'll never forget, I was out with a friend, or actually I was out with an acquaintance, I should better say, and she was telling me that her and her husband were going on vacation. And I instantly became very sad. And I said, well, how often do you all go on vacation? And she says, well, we try to go every year. And I just thought to myself about how robbed I felt. Because I had asked my husband multiple times, like I said, we were married for 12 years, to go on vacation, to do things with me, to just take a day off work, go to a museum, anything. And when it came to me, he was always too busy. Everything else was always more important. But he always demanded that I sacrifice myself for what he felt was important. When he wanted to do something, I needed to be available. But whenever I wanted something, I just learned to do it on my own or do it with friends. And I was often verbally punished for that because he would turn around and say, "Oh, we can never do anything together because you're always gone doing things with your friends." Which now that I'm away, now that I've separated, I can see that that was just manipulation. It was a ploy to never hold accountability for not doing what he should have been doing as a spouse. It was a ploy to cover his bases so that if I ever said, "You never do anything with me," which he never did anything with me, he would say, "I never had time to do anything with you because you were always gone with your friends." But the truth is, I always asked him to do things before I even went to my friends. And then I was trained over more than a decade of marriage to accept and know that he would never be there in that way. He was not a partner, he was not a friend. And so, as I saw this commercial and I saw them frolicking in the field and laughing, and I smiled, I was shocked at my own smile because I remember, I would be with my friends and they would always want to go see a romance movie. I was never a romance lover, but the truth is, I don't know if I wasn't a romance lover or I learned. I think I learned not to be a romance lover because it sparked the desire to be loved, and I did not feel loved, and I knew that I would not be loved the way that I deserved to be loved from my spouse. So watching a romance movie, being around people who felt loving towards each other was very painful because it was a reminder of what I would never have. Another thing that struck me about this commercial was the fact that these were two black people playing love interests for each other. And I know to some people that might not seem revolutionary, but to me, it's revolutionary. And part of that as well, and part of why I look at it that way, is there are so many movies where I feel we are taught as a society and also taught as black and brown people, especially as women, that you are not the most desirable love interest, right? You will never be the main character. You're not going to be the princess. And you're not going to be a princess for a prince that looks like you. Because so often in these types of romance movies that I've noticed, not all the time, but often, when there's a black male lead, there is a much lighter or basically unmelanated female love interest. And so to have a movie where there is a beautiful male lead with a beautiful female lead and they are both black is huge. And for this movie not to be a movie that is glorifying struggle love. Because when I think about the person that I'm becoming, when I think about the person that I was, when I think about the choices that I made in my personal life, even in my choice of who I married and ultimately walked away from, who I dated, um, most of my examples as a young woman were not examples of wonderful, beautiful relationships. They were examples of struggle love, honey. There was no mutual, this man loves her to the moon and back. He thinks that she's wonderful. She loves him to the moon and back, and she thinks that he's wonderful. There was a lot of female degradation being dragged through the mud before finally being treated like a human being. Like it makes me think about when I was younger, one of my friends, one of her favorite movies was like Love and Basketball. I have always hated that movie. I always felt like the female lead was done so dirty. And other movies like Baby Boy, all of those movies were so. The women were not given the justice that they deserved. And what they were praised for was staying in a bad situation and building a man who really only loved her through the lens of how much, how do I word this? He only loved her through the lens of loving himself. Whereas those same women were praised for loving the men more than they loved themselves. And I have not been excited about a romance movie in a long time. But because this looks like the type of movie where this is not a struggle of, this is a romance, I am genuinely excited. And again, that is growth. Because you could not have dragged me to a movie to see a romance in the past. The Notebook, I know people love The Notebook. I don't love The Notebook. I don't love The Notebook. I know that it was sweet and everyone, I get it. I did not, and maybe now I need to look back at it, but I think there's just so much messiness, right? But anywho, it's beautiful to see a story where there are two people who look like me who can actually love and be loved without the auditioning of um, value on your existence, you know? Maybe I'm not saying that right. Anywho, honey, that's all, folks. I guess I'll chat with you next time. Maybe I have more thoughts. Maybe my thoughts will be more organized. I don't know. Anywho, bye.